Now you've got the basics on the four productive conversations. You saw them start with initiative conversations, followed by understanding conversations, performance conversations, and then closure conversations. That makes sense to go from initiative to closure, but that doesn't mean that they have to be used in that particular order or sequence. In fact, your effectiveness at work will increase as you learn to move around and use the four conversations as needed. For example, if you want to propose some kind of changes at work, it would be good to check and see if some people have baggage left over from prior changes. Instead of starting with launching your new idea, you would start with a closure conversation. Acknowledge all the prior changes that have happened and give people a chance to get complete by talking about things that have worked and didn't work with regard to those changes. Then you could propose your new idea in an initiative conversation, saying what you propose, when you think it could happen, and why its accomplishment would be beneficial. You would then follow that with an understanding conversation, where people have a chance to ask questions, clarify your idea, and propose ideas for moving forward. That's when you would use some performance conversations to get people into action, making requests and getting promises to produce results. And then finally, you would cycle back to closure conversations for follow-up on the promises people have made. This is what helps people have a sense of accomplishment in their work. Although there is no particular sequence for using the four conversations, we have learned a few things about them. You can always use closure conversation to clear the way for new things and clean up problems in the workplace. Performance conversation should always be coupled with closure conversations to support people in completing their agreements and building accountability, whether they were successful or not. Initiative conversations can be repeated at every meeting or used as part of all other conversations because people appreciate the reminder about the bigger picture and what they are up to. Understanding conversations are very powerful for engaging people, updating goals and processes, and creating plans. People want to be heard and want to contribute to the workplace, so learning to support dialogue and people's suggestions helps everyone. The results you get from using the four conversations may surprise you. It is worth finding out which of these conversations are most needed in your workplace, and then practicing them until they are part of your daily communication practices. Each of us has certain habits or patterns of communication. We use some conversations more than others, and we forget some conversations completely. Michelle was a senior manager in a human resources department. She was responsible for implementing several programs in her organization, including the training project, which would eventually affect most of her organization's employees. Michelle reported that the training project was not progressing well, even though, as she said, she was talking about it all the time. Her team was missing deadlines, and their results were generally poor. To find out why things were moving so slowly, Michelle reviewed her communications to see if she could discover the source of the problem. Starting with a review of her emails, memos, and meeting notes about the training project, she categorized each of them into one of the four conversations. Then she made a graph of how often she had used each of the four conversations. These are her results. She discovered that she had no initiative conversations, as indicated by the letters IC, and no closure conversations, indicated by the CC. She had used only understanding and performance conversations, indicated by UC and PC respectively, and had had about the same number of each of those. Michelle's analysis confirmed that she was, in fact, talking about the project with the right people, but it also revealed some weaknesses in her communication. Michelle told us, "I was having plenty of understanding conversations, and my performance conversations seemed okay too, because I made lots of requests. But then I noticed I made most of those requests without mentioning the time by when things should be done. No deadlines. I might as well have been wishing instead of communicating. Second, I made very few promises, and I did not ask other people to make promises either. Third, I saw a pattern in the way I made requests. I kept asking for the same things in the same way, without ever nudging people out of their comfort zones to do anything outstanding or beyond the ordinary. Finally, I saw that I was pretty good at thanking people when they did things for me, but I was not following up with people who had promised results and then failed to deliver. I hadn't kept track of my requests, and there was no way to hold anyone accountable for what was not getting done. Bottom line, I never would have believed I was so sloppy in my communication with my staff. Michelle used performance conversations, but without saying when she wanted actions and results. She realized she was never quite sure if her people knew exactly what they were agreeing to do. She occasionally used closure conversations for appreciation, but she did not use them to follow through on what parts of people's agreements were finished or what was still incomplete. She had no system to help people to be accountable for their work or their promises. By not using all 4 conversations completely, Michelle was unknowingly contributing to the failures of her own team. Some of her conversations were actually slowing things down. When she began asking people to specify exactly what they were going to do, putting clear timelines into her requests and promises, and following up on the status of those promises and agreements, the project's momentum increased. Michelle shifted her conversation so that her new profile looks like this. She told us, we started having short weekly debrief meetings. At each meeting, we reviewed what we had done and what was still on the list. We began to see the victories instead of just the problems, and our meetings became little celebrations. People took on new tasks more happily than they did before. Within 3 weeks, we were unstuck and back to making good progress on the training project. Another example of our conversational patterns and their impact and our ability to change them to get better results is given to us by Jason. Jason is a mid-level manager who is accountable for 2 different installation projects in a communication company. Project 1 was progressing well, but Project 2 regularly missed deadlines. It was 3 weeks behind schedule. Since the same people were involved in both of these projects, Jason's explanation for the problems of Project 2 was that his team was not getting sufficient resources and support for that second project. People problems and money problems, he said, those are always the culprits. To test his assumptions and to explore the possibility that the problems had something to do with his communication, Jason kept a project journal for 1 week. He made notes on which of the 4 conversations he used in his conversations with people about both of his projects. He also reviewed his emails and meeting summaries to learn more about his conversational patterns. He expected to see a lot of talk about personnel and resource issues. But after reviewing his conversational records, he came to a different conclusion about the problems regarding Project 2. Jason said, the difference in my communications in the 2 projects was surprising. Project 1 was a new type of installation for us, so I asked for new ideas from my team members, explored ideas with everyone, and then we all made agreements about what we would do before our next meeting. In every weekly project meeting, we reviewed everything that had happened since our last meeting, including things that didn't go the way we expected. And then we would decide what to do next and who would do it. But in Project 2 installation, I didn't do all that. I had done that type of installation before, and I knew how it should go. So I just explained to everybody what needed to be done, instead of asking for their ideas and input. I gave people their assignments and expected them to do their work. I was confident that these were capable, competent people, so I didn't follow up with them. I must admit, I was completely wrong about the lack of resources and support. I didn't find a single request for resources that was denied or a single instance in which support was not provided. As you can see in the graph of Jason's data, there's a big difference in the types of conversations he used. In the face of this data, Jason apologized to his team and then changed his conversational pattern to include the missing conversations. He started by reminding people of the goals for Project 2, and then had closure conversations to help people recognize the successes and failures so far. The first result he noticed was improved creativity and collaboration among the team members. The next result was that productivity picked up. 5 weeks later, Jason reported that his new conversational pattern had gotten Project 2 back on schedule. The results Michelle and Jason produced by shifting their conversational patterns are not unusual. They learned where they were using incomplete conversations, like leaving out by when, or where they were using the wrong conversation to produce a particular result, or even leaving out certain conversations altogether. Their old patterns of conversations were slowing things down, but when they practiced using more complete and appropriate conversations, things picked back up. Over the past 10 years, we've collected data from people at work regarding their communications and their biggest workplace problems. Here's what we've learned. Most frequently reported barriers to success were the ones we have talked about here: lateness, poor quality, lack of teamwork, and so on. When we asked managers and employees, how successful are you at getting the things you need from others? People reported they got what they were promised on time with acceptable quality about 70% of the time. When we asked, how successful are you at delivering things you have promised to others? They reported that they delivered what they promised on time with acceptable quality about 70% of the time also. These are averages across hundreds of people, so some people were much lower than 70% and some were much higher. But in a matter of weeks, after these same people learned to use the 4 productive conversations, their success at receiving what others promised them on time and with acceptable quality increased to 94%. Their own successes at delivering what they promised also increased to over 94%. These results were obtained without replacing any of the people involved, without implementing new incentive systems, and without making any changes in work structures and work processes. It was all a product of using the 4 conversations. We hope you will use the 4 conversations too and practice them in your workplace, although they also work perfectly well at home. You can expect some good results from your new practices and some more productive relationships as well. Everyone wants to be successful at work. Most people want good performance reviews, raises, promotions, interesting job assignments, and a personal sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. Many people also want to go beyond their personal success to include success for their teams or their departments and their organizations. They want to meet organizational goals, enjoy good work morale, and work well with others. People want to do a good job, to have a sense of accomplishment, and to know that what they do really does matter. Bottom line, people want to win at work. You have new tools now that you can use to help yourself and everyone around you. Win with these at work, and thanks for the conversation.